In a world where history is often simplified into the deeds of men on the public stage, there lies an incredible hidden chapter about extraordinary leadership and secrecy. A chapter where a First Lady stepped into power almost unnoticed. Welcome to Cipher Narratives. Today we decode the secret presidency of Edith Wilson, the woman who in the shadows of crisis steered America through one of its most turbulent times. Our story begins in the early 1900s, an era of reform and transformation in America. President Woodrow Wilson, a charismatic leader with a vision for modern America, stood at the helm of a nation aspiring to reform its political system and assert global leadership. But behind every great leader is a powerful, often unrecognized figure. For Wilson, it was his wife, Edith Bowling Galt Wilson. Before the crisis struck, Edith was much more than just a supportive spouse. Known for her astute mind and steadfast loyalty, she was an influential presence in Washington's elite circles. Though she maintained a genteel public persona, in private she was a shrewd operator who cultivated influential relationships and quietly advised her husband on policy and politics. As Wilson's presidency unfolded, a time marked by progressive reforms, global diplomacy, and domestic upheaval, Edith's influence steadily grew. She immersed herself in the intricacies of policy and politics, preparing for a role that history would eventually recognize as nothing short of revolutionary. On October 2, 1919, fate intervened in a dramatic and tragic fashion. President Woodrow Wilson suffered a devastating stroke, a calamity that rendered him nearly incapacitated. With the leader's health in severe decline, the nation was thrust into uncertainty. At this critical juncture, questions of leadership, responsibility, and succession began to swirl in secret hallways. The stroke was not just a personal tragedy for the Wilson family. It was a moment of national crisis. The very foundations of American governance were at stake. With the president's condition shrouded in secrecy from much of the public, a shadow power began forming in the corridors of the White House. Amid the chaos, there was one person who refused to let the country flounder: Edith Wilson. Suddenly, she found herself in the unthinkable position of having to make decisions that until then were reserved for the president alone. Stepping into the breach, Edith began what many historians now refer to as her stewardship of the presidency. In an unprecedented move, she controlled access to the ailing president, filtered the information reaching him, and effectively became the orchestrator of national policy. For months, behind a carefully maintained veil of secrecy, Edith managed both the flow of information and the affairs of state. Her fast decisions, made under the circumstances of extreme personal and national crisis, were guided by the desperate need to protect her husband and ensure the stability of the nation. But this act of quiet authority raised profound constitutional questions and set the stage for an unprecedented role for a woman in the annals of American governance. In a way, Edith was both guardian and gatekeeper, determining who could speak with the president and which issues were deemed urgent. It was a delicate, dangerous balancing act, one that required not only emotional strength but an incredible foresight about the future of the nation. Let's peel back the layers on how this hidden presidency really worked. With Woodrow Wilson incapacitated, all official communications, policy proposals, diplomatic messages, and strategic plans had to pass through Edith. Imagine the immense responsibility of deciding which of these messages warranted immediate attention and which could be delayed or quietly rerouted. She became not only a protector of her husband's legacy, but also, to some extent, the architect of new policy directions. Historians have debated whether Edith acted solely out of a sense of duty or whether she began to harbor personal ambitions for authority. Was it an act purely of love and protection, or did it signal the birth of a new kind of governance where traditional roles could be upended? While the controversy remains, one fact is indisputable. For nearly a year, much of the nation's executive power rested in the hands of a First Lady who was determined to keep the country from descending into chaos. What was remarkable about this arrangement wasn't only its secrecy, it was the trust placed in a woman who had no formal mandate from the electorate to govern. Yet in those dark days following the stroke, it was her decisive action that provided the stability necessary to navigate through the crisis. In many respects, her stewardship prevented further political fragmentation and reassured a nation on the brink of uncertainty. The mechanism of Edith's authority was both innovative and controversial, blurring the lines between the official powers of the presidency and the often invisible influence of the figures who stand behind the scenes. It raises a timeless question. In moments of crisis, how much power should be concentrated in the hands of a single individual, even if that individual is acting with the best interests of the nation at heart? The secret presidency of Edith Wilson didn't just solve a short-term crisis. It set off ripples that would influence American politics for decades to come. Many critics argued that her unilateral control of presidential matters undermined the very foundations of democratic accountability. Questions of constitutional legality were raised. Can anyone, even with the best motives, assume the powers of an elected leader without explicit consent? Some defend her actions as a necessary measure in an extraordinary circumstance, a pragmatic solution to a problem that conventional governance was simply ill-equipped to handle. Others view it as a dangerous precedent, a precedent where personal loyalty and unaccountable power overshadow the formal institutions of the state. The debate continues. Was this an act of guardianship or an overreach of power? While many details remain shrouded in secrecy and speculation, one thing is clear. The actions of Edith Wilson during those months forever altered our understanding of executive leadership. In a country that cherishes the rule of law and the clear separation of powers, her stewardship remains one of the most provocative puzzles in American history. As we close this chapter on one of America's best-kept secrets, we are left with a profound reflection on the nature of power and the arbitrary lines that separate public duty from private action. Edith Wilson's secret presidency serves as a reminder that history is rarely as straightforward as it seems. Behind every monumental decision lies a story of personal sacrifice, uncharted responsibilities, and the willingness to step into the void when crisis demands extraordinary measures. Today, as we peel back the layers of time, Edith's story challenges us to reconsider our assumptions about leadership and accountability. It reminds us that often history's most influential figures emerge not in the glare of public adoration, but in the quiet, determined corridors of crisis where duty and destiny collide. Thank you for joining us on this journey into a hidden era of American governance. If you found this deep dive inspiring, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more explorations into the secret histories that shape our world. Until next time, stay curious and keep uncovering the enigmas of our past.